Okay, freshman A English. I am going to attempt my very first writing tutorial via webcam and our little screencast thing. So bear with me. Here's how it's going to go. Okay, so I'm going to go through our requirements for draft number 2 for our research paper. And I'm also going to then after it, I'll probably pause and then go through a example of the research paper. Oh, hey, Cece, you're on here too. An example of it and make sure that you guys can see all of our requirements and feedback for it in action. Okay, so I'll do 2 videos. You can find all of this on our Google Classroom as well. Okay, so the things that I have up right now are the example research paper with poaching that we've gone through before. I also am going to be referring to the actual notes through our Google Slides, and I'm going to be referencing our assignment sheet. It looks like this, our assignment sheet that we've been going through, and look at all the stuff we've done. That's awesome. We've already done our outline. You guys did your draft number 1 and you've submitted it, and you've also done your self-check sheet. Way to go. Okay, so now we're going to start our draft number 2. So here are the requirements for draft number 2, and I'm going to show you guys today how to actually incorporate all of these into your second draft. So that way we're getting ready for our final draft. So this is what we're trying to accomplish for today. Okay, now over here to our notes. Try to make it pretty easy to follow along. So hopefully this works out, guys. So one of our requirements for draft number 2 is that you have to manipulate your evidence, and you have to do 3 out of these 4 different options that I'm giving you. Okay, so most of you guys in your first draft already were kind of doing this, so that's wonderful. But now I just want to make sure that you all have the same vocabulary and know how to do it appropriately, or that you can go back and double check yourself. Okay, so you have to do 3 out of these 4 options. You have to use the good old ... to manipulate direct quotes. You could use a bracket for clarity, or you could do a quoted in, so it's like a quote within a quote, or you can do a block quote. But if you do block quotes, you cannot have more than 2 block quotes. So right now you're probably well, what are these? What does that mean? So let's talk about them. The reason you would use this option is if you have a very, very long direct quote and you want to shorten it, and you want to just get to the precise information. So you're going to use this ellipse to remove any material from the quote or omit something. So let's say your block quote's getting, or your direct quote's getting really long and you're all that information is not necessary. You can cut it out. Whatever you cut out, or to signify that you cut something out, you just put that little ... which we've talked about this, I believe, before. But you're not altering or changing really the meaning of the direct quote, but what you're doing is just getting to the point a little bit more for a direct quote, because some of your body paragraphs are getting extremely long, and this is a way to shorten it down. Okay, you don't have to use this though if it's the very beginning of the quote or at the very end of a quote. It's only if it's kind of in the middle of a quote. So let's look at our example here together. It says the Chicago Tribune reports, all of a sudden the day will come when they can't marshal their resources, as slim as they are in the morning, to get up for school. Then we have the ... and then the reason there's 4 dots is because that actually comes at the end of the sentence. So then that's a period. So you always use 3 in a row to say that you omitted or removed something. More and more schools are seeing kids miss class because they're tired, not sick. And then we have our citation. That's an author's last name. So this is one thing that you could do in order to shorten our sentences or shorten our direct quotes a little bit, and you could what we call manipulate your evidence, so that way you get to the chase. So this is one of the 4 options. You have to do 3. Okay, then we have brackets, and brackets are different than the parentheses because they're more square shaped, and you do this to add clarity to your direct quotes. Okay, oftentimes it's going to be used for pronouns, if your direct quote says he or she, and then you would use the bracket, not just parentheses, but the bracket to add clarity of who is the he that they are talking about, because they didn't say it in the direct quote. So pretty much if you're ever adding anything that's not original to the direct quote, then you're gonna put it in brackets to say hey, this isn't exactly what the author said, but I need you to understand it, so I'm giving you a little bit of information. So what they have here for our example, this was a direct quote. Our citation is from Driving Parents Crazy. That's the article title because it's in quotation marks. It says, what is the it referring to? Driving imposes a heavy cognitive workload that leaves little processing capacity available for other tasks. So they were adding clarity by saying, like, what is it referring to? It's referring to driving. Oftentimes, like I said, it replaces pronouns. You can't like add full sentences in brackets, but you can add a phrase or two or a word if you need. So that is the second of our 4 options of how to manipulate evidence. Okay, we had students already asking about this when we were in class, and this is if you have a direct quote and within that direct quote, someone else is quoted. You're like, what do I do? It's quoting within another quote. So you are quoting a person or a fact that your source also quoted. So if you're using good sources, they're probably going to have like other references within it because that shows it's like a credible source. So what you need to do is basically put at the end of, like right here, you guys can see it, at the end of the citation or within the citation, you're going to do QTD because that means quoted in Jacobs is like whatever that actual source is. So that is going to be like whatever was on your hanging indent for your citation. This actually has like a page number too. So you can do the double quotation marks plus a single quotation mark whenever you get to your in-text citation, or within it, sorry, to say what was quoted. And then in your in-text citation, you use that quoted in plus your source, okay? We did talk about that, I think, when we were doing a novel, but basically make sure that you really set up with your quote weave, you provide context that like you are quoting within another quote. I'm going to definitely point this out when I do the next video about with the student example because it's easier to just kind of see it in practice. Okay. Did I pause this? Hold on. Uh-oh. What am I doing? Okay, I think I'm back. We'll see. Okay, guys, the 4th option of how you can manipulate evidence to like be more effective is with a block quote. And a block quote is basically, it means you have an extremely long direct quote that you don't want to shorten because it's like so good. The reason it's called a block quote is because literally when you format it, it's going to look like a block in the middle of your paper. So you're going to use a block quote. You can only use it 2 times. You can only have 2 block quotes within your research paper. But you're going to use it if it's a really long quote, meaning it's more than, or it's like 4 or more lines of text, not just like sentences. It could be just like maybe 2 sentences, but they're really long sentences, which creates 4 lines of text. You are always going to establish that you're about to use a block quote with a quote weave that has ends with a colon at the end. So that means you're going to have a complete sentence that introduces the block quote. It establishes the credibility, the trustworthiness like of that quote that as you're introducing it. And then you're going to use a colon as we have here demonstrated. And then, like we said, we can only use 2 within your paper. But the weird thing about a block quote is going to be this formatting, is that you want to indent the entire quote 2 times. So it's actually like twice indented over, and it's going to create that like block shape. When you're just like scanning through a paper, you can automatically just see like, oh my gosh, that's a block quote because it's indented twice over. And I don't know why they do this to us, but of course they like change all the formatting and make it crazy. And you do not need to put quotation marks around the entire block quote because like, why not throw another curveball? Thanks, MLA. But we are going to know that it's like a direct quote because of like the weird formatting block shape of it. You only need to use like quotation marks is if you have like a quote within your quote of your block quote. It's like Inception, basically. You continue double spacing it, and then this is also throwing you for a loop. You also put the MLA citation is like the same format, except they put the period before the parentheses instead of after it. I don't know why. So weird. I don't understand why they do this to us. I forget what that says right down there, but I'm sure we're going to see an example of it on the next slide. Yay. Okay, so let's pretend that this is our like paragraph, beginning of our paragraph for our paper. And then this is like it indented one time to say like, this is the beginning of a new paragraph, right? And you have to imagine that this is all double spaced. And you can just see by the look of it, like this is indented 2 times over and it looks like a giant block. So that is our block quote. They have their quote weave here. It says, a sleep specialist at the Stanford Center for Sleep Sciences and Medicine states, and then it's a colon. It has to be a colon. Then we have this really, really long direct quote. The direct quote for this block quote is not in not in quotation marks because they like to throw you for a loop, because instead every line is indented twice. And guys, you're just gonna have to go through and like format it that way, like through trial and error. Like sometimes you have to go to the end of the sentence and press like tab 2 times and then it will start to indent. Sometimes you have to go to the beginning of the sentence and press twice and then delete. I don't know. You just have to try it over and over again until you get it right. And that's my hot tip. That's a good tip for life. Try it over and over again until you get it right. And then at the end here, because they throw us for a loop, you actually do put the period at the end of the direct quote, and then you have your MLA citation in parentheses. This is like an author's last name, so they put it there. There's no period at the end. I don't know why they change it. Everything else is normal. Like every other time, we always put our period at the end of the citation. This time we don't. And then here is another little thing. After it, you always have to explain your direct quotes, guys, because we always do that in our writing. You have to explain what basically the reader just read. This is not indented because it's not the start of a new paragraph. It is like continuing right after this block quote. So do not indent until you have another new paragraph. Okay, so this is the author or like the writer's original ideas. They're explaining the direct quote. It just starts in the next line after the block quote. Again, only can have 2 of those in your paper. Okay, so those were, I'm going to just go back real quick. Those were the 4 different ways that we can manipulate evidence to like be more effective, but you have to do 3 out of those 4. Whatever works best for you. Okay, now let's go on. Draft number 2 also has to have a variety of quote weave styles. And guys, we have been working on quote weaving since the beginning of the year. So this should pretty much be a review. You have to do all 3 types, and looking at your first drafts, we were actually already starting to do this, which is great because one of your requirements for the first draft was to have your quote weaves that establish source credibility. So all you should have to do this time, since you already have quote weaves that are establishing the source credibility or introducing the direct quotes, you just have to make sure you have all 3 of these types. And so you might just have to do some revision, but it shouldn't be a huge deal. Okay, just to remind you guys that you're always establishing the source credibility with these quote weaves for the direct quotes. Basically, you have to introduce the research and say, like, what's trustworthy about it? How did you know that this was a valid source? Maybe you're talking about like the author and what makes the author credible because they have like a certain level of education or they have like work experience. Maybe you're introducing like the study that it was conducted and explain what the study, how the study was actually like put together, like how many participants were there or what like college or university or campus put on the study. You could establish the trustworthiness of your source and then it's like valid by explaining what that like organization is associated with or any like accolades or like awards that they have had or made or received, I guess. And basically you guys are really smart students. So you just have to explain, how did you know that that source was credible? That's going to be with your quote weave. But here are the 3 different ways that you introduce that. You could do it with like a speaker tag. And again, I'll point this out in our student example paper after this about poaching. And you always put a comma and then go into the direct quote. You could have a complete thought. So that means it's literally a full sentence right before the direct quote, but then you put a colon, just like when we're doing block quotes. Okay, so it has to be able to stand by itself. It's an independent, complete thought. And then it would be a colon and then go into the direct quote. Or, again, throwing you for a loop, it could be an incomplete sentence that must have the quote in order for it to be a complete thought or a complete sentence. If we took away the direct quote, then like